Okay. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm here from the HEALEY Center with our weekly HEALEY ALS Platform Trial webinar. And tonight I'm here with our patient navigation team. As always, Alison and Catherine are joining us, which is wonderful. And tonight we have a special guest. We're particularly excited to meet PIs, people who are enrolling participants in the trial at different locations, more than 50 locations across the country. And tonight it's really a pleasure to have Dr. Swenson here from the University of Iowa. So we can go to the next slide and introduce Andrea, who will be speaking with us tonight. So I'll turn it over to you and tell us more about your site and your experience in the trial.
Great. Thank you so much. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, thanks again for inviting me to tonight's webinar. As Dr. Paganoni had mentioned, I'm a neurologist at the University of Iowa and specialize in neuromuscular disorders. I direct our ALS center, which includes our ALS multidisciplinary clinic. You can go to the next slide. So our mission within the center and the clinic is three-part. So education, which includes teaching and training tomorrow's healthcare providers, research, bringing new discoveries and new treatments, and patient-centered care, providing high-quality clinical services. Next slide. So our clinic at the University of Iowa serves the entire state of Iowa, as well as Western Illinois. And we do get some patients who come up from Northern Missouri and a few who come from Eastern Nebraska. So it is a pretty large catchment area, and the state of Iowa is 310 miles across, so we're really a rural state. And many of our patients come from rural settings and travel a total of 180 miles for an in-person clinic visit on average. Next slide. So our multidisciplinary clinic utilizes 2 locations, and we do that because of our large catchment area and trying to be more convenient for patients who don't live so close to our main center, which is in Iowa City. So most of our patients are seen there. It's the University of Iowa Hospital and Clinic's main campus. This is an 800-bed hospital, so it's a pretty big center. So that's in Iowa City, and I have a couple pictures of what the hospital looks like there. One day a month, we have an outreach clinic, which is in Des Moines, which is 2 hours west of Iowa City. We have it in this cute little building that I have pictured here. I was told that originally this was built to become a Dunkin' Donuts, but they turned it into a clinical space instead, and it's worked out perfectly for us. So when our patients come to either clinic, they are assigned one room and the therapists come to them. So our patients and families don't need to travel across the hospital, which is about 1/3 of a mile from end to end. And our clinic, our neurology clinic, is 500 feet away from physical therapy clinics. So it's just a lot easier for everyone to be in one place. We follow about 110 to 120 patients at any time. And we have a team of wonderful, knowledgeable therapists and providers with a lot of experience working with patients with ALS. All right, next slide. So here's a photo. It's mostly students waving up at the Children's Hospital during a football game. Speaking of students and trainees, we have many different types rotating through our clinic. We have a neurology residency program here at the University of Iowa, as well as a neuromuscular medicine fellowship. So residents and fellows are rotating through our clinics all the time. They really learn a lot from our team and from our patients and their families. We also have medical students, PT, OT, speech pathology students, as well as nursing students who all rotate through. In addition, our therapists and providers give continuing medical education to community providers, nurses, therapists, hospice groups, and we also do a lot with our patient support groups throughout Iowa. All right, next slide. So research is very important to our center. Many of our patients and families are really interested in participating in research in some form. And our goal is to have research opportunities available to our patients at all times. We're really honored to be a site for the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. Already we have witnessed the unique trial design speed up this process of getting investigational drugs into studies. And one thing I'll never forget about this trial is that it began recruiting in the early phases of the pandemic and really proved that even when so much around us was shut down, we really could keep research going, which was awesome. So we recently became activated for the cytokinetics trial, which is called Courage ALS. So this trial will be enrolling alongside the platform trial, but the criteria to get into the trials is a bit different. So we will really work with patients and their families to navigate which trial feels to be the best fit for them. This week, we were activated for a trial through AI Therapeutics. This is specific for patients with ALS associated with C9 or 72 mutations. And we screened our first patient for that this week. We do recognize that not every patient meets criteria to enroll in a clinical trial. Therefore, we always want to have something available for all of our patients. A research project that we're working on with our ICTS, or Institute for Clinical and Translational Science at the University of Iowa, is assessing clinical trial engagement with our patient population. So this is open to all of our patients with ALS. We have been putting together focus groups and conducting semi-structured interviews to gather patients' perspectives on clinical trials, whether they're in trials or not, and to really identify what are potential barriers and facilitators to participation. Eventually, once we get through the focus groups interviews, we'll be bringing this out to a survey to send out to our patients. So another option, which I think there's been a lot of discussion about this recently, are the extended access programs. These may be options for some patients who do not qualify for other trials. This initiative has really been driven by the NEALS Consortium with the ability to potentially facilitate access locally. So depending on the situation, through these EAPs, patients may be able to access investigational treatments, and which may be of interest, particularly if clinical trials are not an option. Next slide. So for our contact information for clinical trials, Hina Olalde is our main clinical trial nurse. She's been working in neurology and ALS trials for many years and is wonderful. Emily McDonnell just started with us recently and is really getting up to speed with ALS trials and helping out quite a bit. And then for our ALS multidisciplinary clinic, I just threw the number in there as well. So that's all I have for my slides.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea, for all the work you're doing in Iowa. And it's really great to be able to offer the trial at multiple locations. So thank you for that. I'm glad to see you have more than one trial. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll now provide a quick update, and then we can take a few other questions that are coming in. Feel free to type any questions in the Q&A box. So as you know, we added a new regimen in 2022, Trialos, or Regimen E, which we're very excited about. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm happy to announce that we actually started dosing people in the trial, so in the regimen E. So as you know, the first 4 regimens have completed the enrollment, so we're following the participants to get all the final results. But the regimen number 5, or the regimen E, just started the enrollment, and so we're very, very happy to work with many sites on these new regimens. So we have spots now essentially available for new people who want to enroll. Next slide. And at this time, we are enrolling at 14 sites, and so that's really great. That's a first group, but there are many other sites that are participating and about to be activated. And some of the sites that are already enrolling are actually new to the platform trial. We started the platform trial at the beginning of the pandemic, as Dr. Swenson said, with a group of about 50 sites, but then we selected a few more who are joining, and so with those new sites, sites. We are also expanding to new geographies. So for example, we have now a site in Idaho that's now enrolling for Regiment E already. And we have a couple of other sites that are highlighted here, Lehigh Valley and Virginia, that are in states where we had other sites, but they're new to us as a location. And so they obviously have a new patient population and offer new opportunities locally. Next slide. So there's a few other sites that are making progress towards Regiment E activation. This is the list of the next few sites. We are basically activating sites in groups, if you will, because you know, they have to undergo some administrative processes as well as training. And then as they're ready, we bring them on board. I would say that unfortunately, we're still seeing some supply chain shortages because of the pandemic again, and that's why we cannot essentially activate everyone at once. Because we need to sort of pace that, because the drug supply itself, labels for the drugs and some shipping materials and other supplies, again, have been in demand. And so essentially we have to pace it, but certainly we want to make progress fast. And so we continue to activate and people can be enrolled at this time. Next slide. So if you want to know if the site near you is active for Regiment E, you can check that on our website. On the slide, we have a screenshot of our website as well as the QR code and the link to go there. So the majority of sites that are listed are active in the trial because they have been involved in regiments A, B, C, and D, and those are still ongoing. We're still following participants, and you know, that's still active participation in the trial. But now a few of them, the 14 that I just mentioned earlier, are recruiting for Regiment E. So that's why we have sort of a different status highlighted on the website. And if you can go to the next slide, if you just want to get more information about Regiment E and what participation would entail and what the drug is about, you can also download from our website a brochure that tells us more about the trial and the regimen. I really want to thank our patient navigation team who is with us on the call today. They put together this beautiful brochure and information, as well as the QR code and link on the slide. So you can use all of that to get more information. Again, everything is publicly available. Next slide. But if you want to also talk to them in person, talk to our patient navigation team, you can also do so by calling them or emailing them. And again, all the information is on this slide, so that, you know, if you have additional questions, even outside of this webinar, they're always available to talk to you. I'm very excited that representatives from Silos Therapeutics will be here next week, March 10, so it will replace our regular weekly update. We're going to have a science webinar about Regiment E, about the drug. So if you have any questions about the drug, you know, the preclinical development, the mechanism of action, previous experience, etc., please come next week. We're going to have the scientists who have been developing this drug for a number of years on the call with us, so they can answer all your questions. And then after that, we will resume our tour across different sites. We're going to have Dr. Kazarski from Kentucky, as well as Dr. Shah from Florida for the rest of the March program. Next slide. And last but not least, we are again continuing to schedule new webinars. So we plan on continuing this weekly series, but please check out our newsletter, our website, because every week we have a different topic, and they will be scheduled as we get availability from the different speakers, including biostatisticians. We had a few questions about biostatistics. We had a biostatistician join us in the past, and she'll come back again, as well as other experts on different topics. So keep sending us questions and ideas. And with that, I think we can stop sharing this slide, and we can start taking questions. Dr. Swenson, I have a question for you. You mentioned a trial that's targeted to a specific population, a population of people that have ALS associated with an expansion in the C9 or 72 site, genetic site. So, so the question is, you know, if somebody knows that they carry the C9 mutation, but they don't have any presenting symptoms yet, are there trials available for those individuals?
For us, we just have the trials that are for ALS associated C9. I'm not sure if there's what trials are available for pre-symptomatic.
Yeah.
But that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I had to say that's really something that people are looking into heavily. You know, there's really a lot of activity in terms of setting up something called Prevent ALS, basically to essentially target people who carry the mutation but don't have the symptoms yet. The only program that's currently enrolling that I'm aware of in that kind of with that goal is the ATLAS study for carriers of a different mutation. That's the SOD1 mutation. That's a study sponsored by Biogen. As you may know, Biogen does have an antisense oligonucleotide in development for people who carry the mutation and also have symptoms. That's the first one. But they also have a study that just started that's enrolling people who carry the mutation and don't have ALS yet. It's a longitudinal study, so they don't get the drug yet, but they're monitored with the idea of intervening essentially very soon, very early in the future. So if people have the SOD1 mutation, I think that's the option. For C9, I'm not aware of a similar study right now, but I know that there's a lot of interest in developing. So please come back with this question, and obviously as things develop, we'll keep you posted. Dr. Swenson, a question about a couple of questions about from people who are from Iowa. So somebody said, we live close to Iowa City and have a relative with ALS. So the question is, how do we enroll in the platform trial if he cannot qualify because of breathing problems? He has a tracheostomy, so perhaps again, the platform trial may not be an option. So what can they do in terms of expanded access and off labels in Iowa City?
Yeah. So a couple different things. When patients call us specifically with these questions, we kind of want to know a couple things. If they are connected with a multidisciplinary clinic, if not, we would definitely recommend getting an appointment with us, which we can set up really easily. If they're closer to another clinic, we can help facilitate that. But that would be sort of the first thing we'd want to address. And then if they want to just look into clinical trials, we can have them get in touch directly with our clinical trial coordinators. I just looked on here and saw the VA pop up, and we do have a VA in Iowa City, which is actually right across the street from the university hospitals, and they have a separate VA ALS clinic. And we have had patients who've done all of their clinical care at the VA, but come over to the university for the clinical trials. So definitely you can call either any of the numbers that I listed there for either the clinical trials or for the multidisciplinary clinic.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, could we go back to the slides where we have the numbers for the from Dr. Swenson's clinic? If we can pull them up again, we can share. Also, these slides are routinely uploaded on our website, so you can always go back to our website, download the slides, or record the video, watch the recording of the video. So you can always retrieve that information that way. So again, somebody else, as you just mentioned, is seen at the VA in Iowa City, has a tracheostomy and wouldn't qualify for the trial. But you mentioned some focus groups and EAP. Again, the question is, would these be good options, and how to contact you? So any further comments, Dr. Swenson, on these? Or
any of those numbers and then the email addresses as well work too.
Great. So another question about somebody who has a tracheostomy. So if somebody has a tracheostomy, yes, they are not eligible for regimen E or the platform trial, again, because of the cutoff in terms of respiratory function. But there are other options that Dr. Swenson just mentioned. There's a few other questions. So a question about, if somebody is in, let's say that somebody is in the open label extension of a certain regimen, and then that drug is not working. So for example, we just stopped for futility regimen A. And so let's say that somebody was in the open label extension of regimen A and the drug was stopped. So what are the options for an open label extension participant after the open label extension is discontinued? Do you want to comment, Dr. Swenson?
Yeah, this was definitely a lot of our discussions this week with patients who were in regimen A. So what we have talked with our patients about this week is if it's possible that they would qualify for another arm in the platform trial. Again, that's looking at the inclusion criteria that we looked at when they started. So looking at the forced vital capacity would be the big one. So it'd be almost like starting over as far as the screening process to see if they can screen into another regimen.
Yeah. So, and I want to take another question again, that sort of along the same lines. Again, the question was, if somebody was in the Leucoplan and has been now over 3 years since onset and no longer qualifies for the trial, what are the options? So essentially, for someone to re-enter the platform trial, they will still have to qualify. So the other options would be either other trials that don't have criteria such as time since onset, for example. People may qualify for other trials, or there could be expanded access options. I would say that we are working closely with the other companies to open more slots for expanded access. So if you are in that situation, if somebody on the line is a participant that no longer, was in the Leucoplan regimen and no longer qualifies to re-enter the platform trial because of whatever reason, whether it's respiratory function or time since onset, please connect with your site and let us know if you're interested in an expanded access option. I would say they may not be offered at all sites, so I cannot promise that this will be super convenient for everyone, but let's talk about options. And again, you can talk to your site team. So there is a question, there's actually two questions that are almost identical about the futility stop to regimen A. And the question is actually not so much about regimen A, but about the other regimens. The questions are, can you please comment on the interim analysis for the other regimens, B, C, and D? And a similar question was, did the other regimens go through and pass the futility review at the same time? So yes, so the futility reviews are done at the same time for all applicable regimens. So specifically in this case, A, B, C, and D, and regimen E obviously just started, so there isn't enough data. But for A, B, C, and D, yes, they do have sort of the same calendar review based on calendar dates, and B, C, and D did pass. Only A did not pass. So a couple of questions. Dr. Swenson, there's a general question about sort of science. Can motor neurons regenerate, or are there specific genes to reactivate motor neurons?
Oh, that is a great question. And I think if we knew more about that process and particularly which genes to turn on to really have an effect on regeneration, I think that would be a drug mechanism that would really make a difference. But I think there's still a lot that we need to learn about that process, and still need to explore what exactly the mechanisms are, and particularly the genes that we could focus on turning on.
Yeah, and again, in terms of mechanisms, there's another great question about different mechanisms between trialose and riluzole. I don't know if you want to start commenting on that. I know we will talk about trialose next week, but maybe in terms of, in general, what are the mechanisms for the drugs that are approved right now?
Yeah, it's interesting to bring this up. We had a grand rounds earlier this week where we talked quite a bit about autophagy and how it's not functioning like it should in ALS. So the process of autophagy is necessary for all cells to break down and kind of chew up these proteins that are not functioning like they should. And when autophagy is not working right, those proteins just build up and aggregate in cells and lead to cell toxicity and cell death. So with trehalose, it's supposed to enhance autophagy, which will hopefully reduce the protein buildup and allow cells to not get toxic and do okay. So I think that's a really exciting mechanism, and kind of a newer one that's being evaluated in ALS. So I'm really looking forward to see how that arm goes.
Yeah. Exactly. And there's another comment, very timely. Somebody said they watched another webinar yesterday. I think it was the Everything ALS webinar with Dr. Katz. And Dr. Katz said that trials that focus on TDP-43 are important. So again, to your point, the question is Regimen E working on that? So perhaps you can explain that again, that ultimately, it does work on TDP-43.
Right. Yeah. I think that TDP-43 is something that has been known about for a while with ALS, and we know that in most cases of ALS, that is the protein that's building up. And I think this is a really exciting time to now focus on TDP-43 and preventing the protein aggregates and really getting hopefully to the root of that problem. And I hope that this will make a difference in disease progression.
Yeah, and the other part of the question was the mechanism of riluzole. Well, that's actually different. It's an anti-glutamatergic drug. So the beauty of this is that we're looking at different drugs that target different mechanisms, and hopefully we can use all of them as a cocktail to sort of attack ALS from different angles, which I think is going to be beneficial. So we have one last question. There's actually another question. How does how does UNC13A make TDP-43 so bad? I think somebody's referring to genetic mutations that are associated when they're present in a certain way with faster progression. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Dr. Swenson.
Yeah. Yeah, I think kind of going back to the TDP-43, I think probably more of it building up is going to lead to more aggressive progressive disease. So if there's any process that can prevent that protein aggregation, I think is very promising.
Yeah, and I think it's great that given the number of questions we've been receiving about TDP-43, we may want to have one of our science speakers come and just address that as one topic. What is TDP-43 and what does it do? Because I mean, many of the drugs in the platform trial do target that, because as you said, it's so important, so critical. So really the holy grail of ALS, I think, is really how to get rid of TDP-43. And many of these drugs are trying to do that. So the last question, I think there's a general question: is there a risk of approving a drug that passed phase 2 but has not been yet tested in phase 3? And the question refers to AMX35. So Dr. Swenson, do you have any comments on sort of the risks and benefits of sort of approving drugs earlier versus later?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. With the phase 3 trials, they tend to have hundreds of patients in them. And by the time a drug gets to a phase 3, it's been through trials that are looking at the safety, the tolerability of it, taking into account if it actually does something for the disease. So I still do feel like the phase 3 trials are really important to answer the question of, we know a medication's safe, we know people tolerate it, but how effective is it in doing what we want it to do for a disease? So I think phase 3 still really has a place in what we're doing with ALS. As far as approving drugs after phase 2, I think as phase 2 trials have really come a long way, and particularly with the work that everyone has been doing through the NEALS Consortium. They've figured out ways to look at phase 2 trials to see if they are reaching the outcomes that we're looking for, looking at different ways to see if a medication is going to have an effect long term, even though we're just studying it for a short period of time. So I think trial design in phase 2 has really blossomed, and I think that has helped us get to the point where we are feeling more comfortable with moving into approval even after phase 2 trials. But I think it's a great question. I think both trials, phase 2 and phase 3, are very important, and also looking at the actual trial design is key.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I just see the last question that just came in. I have the C9 gene and I live in California. Do you know any trials I could join? There's at least 2, if perhaps soon another one. There are trials that are open for C9, and I believe at least some of them do have sites in California. So perhaps, do you mind reaching out to Catherine and Alison, and maybe we can connect them with Judy and our access nurses for discussion about sort of, what there are a few options, and I know at least some of them are already or will soon be available in California. So great. Okay, and with that, thank you so much, Dr. Swenson, for being here today. It's really great to get to know your site. I know you're doing great work. You participated in the AMX35 trial and now in the platform trial and many other trials, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And next week we'll be here to learn more about Regiment E, which is the new regiment. So please come back to that and share the news. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.